If someone asked you to name a product that was first made 2,000 years ago, still looks and works as it always has, and still plays a vital role in global commerce, would you be stumped? It turns out the answer is the simple wooden barrel. Almost always made of oak, barrels have a long and fascinating history. First built and used by the Celts and Romans, they have held nearly every commodity over the centuries. Metal and plastic and cardboard long ago eclipsed barrels for the shipment of most items, but when it comes to wine and whiskey, especially bourbon whiskey, the oak barrel still reigns, not just as a container, but for the magic that the wood gives the whiskey.
The story will continue in a moment.
We were speaking with someone, and they called a whiskey barrel a breathing time machine.
I love that.
Brad Boswell is the CEO of Independent Stave, the largest maker of wooden barrels in the world. Brad's great-grandfather founded the company in 1912 in Missouri. It now has operations worldwide. We met him in Kentucky.
Most of our barrels would have a useful life of 50 plus years.
50 plus years.
50 plus years, yeah. Like I'll go to different places and look at barrels at distilleries or wineries around the world, and I can see barrels that my grandfather made, in the 1960s. I still see them.
A barrel begins as a log from a white oak tree, fed into what's known as a stave mill, where it's cut into ever smaller pieces, staves, which are then arranged in huge Jenga-style stacks and seasoned outdoors for 3 to 6 months before heading to a nearby cooperage where the barrels are built.
There's no nails, we'll go here, no glue.
Brad Boswell's newest cooperage produces thousands of barrels every day.
How many of these go into a typical barrel? Typically between 28 and 32 staves per barrel.
After a barrel is raised, mostly by hand, it travels through a host of other steps and checks to make it ready to begin its life, including being toasted and then charred on the inside.
Most of the barrels we make today are bespoke. We know exactly who this barrel is going to, which distillery.
How about that?
The demand for such a huge volume of barrels can be attributed mainly to one thing: bourbon.
President Franklin Roosevelt in the 30s became more specific about what bourbon and whiskey should be. And at that time he said, bourbon should be in new charred oak barrels.
So if it's not in one of these barrels, it's not bourbon.
That's correct. Bourbon has to be aged in a new charred oak container.
That rule, plus booming consumer demand for bourbon starting in the early 2000s, has been very good for the barrel business. 3.2 million new barrels were filled with whiskey last year in Kentucky alone, and more than 14 million full barrels are aging in the state in massive warehouses known as rickhouses. How many barrels are in this rickhouse?
23,500 on 6 floors.
Dan Calloway is the master blender for Bardstown Bourbon, a young but fast-growing Kentucky distillery.
To make a great whiskey, you have to start with a great distillate, a clear spirit, but then the magic comes from the barrel. The fact that it's new charred oak, it's just incredible.
So the barrel is crucial to your product.
Absolutely. Depending who you talk to, some would say 50% of the flavor, maybe up to 70, 80% of the characters derive from that barrel.
The rest of the flavor comes from what's known as the mash bill. Grains like corn and wheat and rye that are mixed with water and fermented with yeast. Despite bourbon having recently been threatened or hit with tariffs by other countries in retaliation for President Trump's tariffs, Bardstown's huge distillery is still producing enough new whiskey to fill more than 5,000 barrels a week.
You take the clear liquid, which is basically what people call moonshine, goes through this process and comes out as this beautiful brown, tasty liquid here. How does that happen?
Yeah, so I always compare it to a seesaw. Okay, so when it comes off the still, moonshine, like you said, it's a seesaw that's out of balance. But every year that goes by of the barrel aging, the seesaw comes into balance. And what the barrel is bringing is caramel, vanilla, baking spice, and all this rich, beautiful color.
How can solid oak produce all those flavors and spices? Back where the barrels are built, Brad Boswell gave us a vivid lesson with a barrel that had just been toasted, a process that brings sugars in the wood to the surface.
Smell that, smell them. I mean,
That does smell delicious.
it's incredible.
It really does. It's amazing.
There's a reason why people still use oak barrels 2,000 years later.
So when I'm sipping the bourbon, I'm sipping this barrel.
That's right, absolutely.
After toasting, we and the barrels moved to the visually stunning char oven.
So we'll see this barrel coming through right here.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah, so actually the inside of the barrel is on fire.
So you just light the barrel on fire.
Yep, we light the barrel on fire. And that teases out more and more of the flavors, and we call that an alligator char, because the inside of the barrel actually looks like kind of an alligator's back. And you can see
We could see that blistering inside a newly charred barrel pulled off the line.
I mean, people, expect this to smell like a campfire. It smells more like a confectionery product.
It does. I can smell the caramel and the vanilla.
Yeah.
What that barrel can give to the whiskey is evident in these glasses.
So this is the same exact distillate that came off the still at the exact same time, went into a barrel 4 years later, and this we just kept in a glass bottle.
It's also apparent in the taste. First, the white lightning,
Wow, that gives a punch.
Yes, it does. It does.
and then the barrel-aged bourbon.
Oh, big difference.
Huge difference.
Smooth.
Oh, it's smooth.
Some of that smooth comes from temperature swings in the rickhouses, according to Bardstown Bourbon's Dan Calloway.
We want those swings. When it gets really hot, things expand, lets the liquid in. When it gets cold, it contracts. And it's that natural progression of in, out that ages the bourbon so beautifully as the liquid interacts with the wood.
As those barrels are aging whiskey for 4, 5, or 6 years, some savvy investors have figured out there's money to be made.
Whiskey is an interesting asset in the sense that as it ages, it becomes more valuable.
Chris Heller is co-founder of California-based Cordillera Investment Partners.
So explain to me how this works. You go up to a distiller and say, I want to buy those barrels filled with what will eventually become bourbon.
So that is exactly right. So what happens
Heller and his partners buy thousands of newly filled barrels from distillers, pay to store them as the whiskey ages, then sell them to craft bourbon brands.
What are your starting costs?
somewhere in the $600 to $1,000 range is sort of the price of what's called a new fill barrel of whiskey.
At the end, what do you sell it for?
It can be anywhere from $2,000 to $4,000 by the end.
That's a pretty good return on your investment.
We really find it an interesting and compelling investment area.
Nice way to say it, huh?
Whoever makes it, owns it, or ages it, when bourbon is emptied from a barrel after 5 or 6 years, that barrel's life is just beginning, and it's likely to travel the world.
It's really interesting that when the bourbon barrel is freshly dumped, there's still around 2 gallons of actually bourbon trapped in that wood.
That is just seeped into the
Seeped
wood.
into the wood. So then a lot of the secondary users actually look forward to putting their product into the barrel again for 4, 6, 10, a lot of scotches, 12 years, 18 years.
And it can pick up that
and then
American
pull-
bourbon
yeah,
taste.
Absolutely, then it pulls out that sweet bourbon.
That sweet taste in the wood makes used bourbon barrels very hot commodities.
We really view our role in the industry as moving as many barrels from the original source to the next stopping point as fast as possible.
Jess and Ben Losky own Midwest Barrels. Their Kentucky warehouse is stacked to the rafters with empty barrels.
So we're the next stop for the second use of that barrel. So in Kentucky here, we bring in barrels from all the major distilleries and then send them back out.
these barrels would be shipped out and then refilled with something else.
Correct, yeah. So the idea is to get these barrels in here and out of here as quickly as possible. So we'll turn over this entire warehouse every 2 to 3 weeks. Probably 70 to 80% of our business is overseas at this point.
It started as a hobby. While Ben was finishing his PhD in Nebraska, he began buying barrels and selling them to local craft breweries.
You said that a few barrels were a big order in the beginning.
Yeah,
What's a big order today?
10,000.
10,000.
Yeah. India and China and Scotland and Ireland are by far our 4 biggest markets.
The Kentucky Distillers Association says that the state exported more than $300 million worth of used barrels last year, just to Scotland, where they'll be used to age Scotch whiskey for up to 40 years.
Could you just tick off for me the different spirits that these barrels will hold?
They start with bourbon, Tennessee whiskey, Scotch whiskey, tequila, rum, pisco made in Peru, cachaça made in Brazil. We use these barrels.
Beer.
Beer uses them. These barrels for sure end up in China. A lot of these barrels end up in Japan. It's everywhere.
Beautiful.
Now, master blenders like Bardstown's Dan Calloway
This will be cast strength, direct from the barrel.
are bringing barrels back to Kentucky to do special finishes for their whiskeys.
So this is the first of its kind. It is an American whiskey finished in Indian whiskey barrels, okay? Indian whiskey is traditionally aged in a bourbon barrel. So the physical barrel has left Kentucky, gone to Bangalore, filled with a barley, and then sent back here.
Calloway finished this whiskey in those barrels for 17 months.
My God, that's good.
Yeah.
Dan Calloway's newest creation, called Cathedral, may be his most miraculous yet.
We sourced wood in the Loire Valley, the Bercé Forest, and this lot in the forest was selected to repair Notre Dame after the fires. So most of the wood went there. We were fortunate to obtain 6 barrels made from that wood. And we picked our best stocks of Kentucky bourbon up to 19 years old, filled the barrels. They aged for 14 months.
You know how wild that is?
Yeah.
That the beams that restored Notre Dame come from the same forest as your casks.
The same lot.
Now that's a story to tell.
Absolutely.
And a whiskey to taste.
Ah.